Everybody. Let's get started working with Adobe Animate. It's Adobe's animation software, and you probably know of it more as Flash. Originally, it was called Adobe Flash, and Flash was sort of a problem for people on the internet. A lot of times you might remember having the error, your Flash plugin needs to be updated or whatever, and you couldn't view certain websites. And people actually use Flash to make real simple games and stuff like that. I don't think people do use Animate to do that very often anymore, but you can. And Adobe sort of has fixed that problem, and so is the HTML5 update. So HTML5 is a lot more capable of running animation than HTML used to be. And so Adobe actually went ahead and renamed the software to just Adobe Animate. I think principally because people hated Flash so much. And also, if Flash is being completely phased out in terms of the internet. Most of your web browsers now, if you want them to use Flash, you have to go into the preferences and tell them that that's okay. And Firefox is one of the only ones that's kind of holding on. But in the next couple years, it'll be gone altogether. We're not going to be exporting for the web on our projects using Adobe Animate. We're just going to be creating basically animations or cartoons doing that. And so we're going to start off making a really simple one of a bouncing ball. And so we're going to start off doing that right now. So just go ahead and click and open up Adobe Animate CC for Creative Cloud, right? So you'll notice right off that a lot of this stuff should look relatively familiar to you. The interface to me looks a lot like Illustrator or Photoshop. Not all of the tools work exactly the same, so you can't assume that, but there is certainly some commonality. And we're going to go ahead and create a file. Select ActionScript 3.0. ActionScript is actually a language that is used to program inside of Flash. We're not going to actually have to use the command line or script it all for what we're doing right now, but it is something that can help create functionality inside of Flash projects. But just select ActionScript 3.0. And then if your screen looks like this, go ahead and click on View and Zoom in so you get a little bigger artboard to work with. And let's just start off by making our ball that we're going to have bouncing. So instead of being like Illustrator where you click and hold down and you have all the different shapes that you can make, the shapes are actually separated out here in Flash. So we're going to use the oval tool. And I don't want to make a green oval. Well, yeah, let's make a green oval. But we want it to be a ball. So when you first drag, it might look like this, but if you hold down the Shift key, then it'll make sure that everything comes out round, and you can just let go, and there you go. You've got that. Then I'll select my black arrow, and I'll move this sort of to a more centered location on the screen, and click off. That looks pretty good to me. So instead of drawing this frame by frame, so, you know, when cartoons first started coming around, if you watch like Fantasia or older cartoons, every single frame of those cartoons had to be drawn individually. You don't have to do that anymore. Computers really help with that. And so we're going to use a motion tween to create this bouncing ball effect, and it will make it take a lot less time than it would have if you had to do each frame. So what do I mean by frames? Think about it like if you did a flip book, maybe using Post-it notes, or I can remember I used to use paperback books that I would have at the house, and I would draw a little something different on each page and then flip through to create this motion animation effect. That's what each frame is. It's like a page in your flip book. But you don't have to draw each page. Instead, you can use some of the capabilities of Animate to do that for you. And that capability is called a motion tween. So I'm going to go down here, and you can see there's a dot in this first frame, and that's called a keyframe. And I'm going to click on that keyframe, and I'm going to click on Create Motion Tween. So in order to do that, it's going to bring up this dialog box, and it's going to say that the selected item can't be tweened until you convert it to a symbol, and you'll say, sure, go ahead and do that. So now you can work with that. Right now, this is creating a 24 frame long motion tween. And if you look down here, our animation rate is 24 frames per second. So if you think of it in terms of your flip book, that means if you flip the book for 1 second, you're going to flip through 24 pages, right? So 24 frames to a second. Let's make ours about 5 seconds long. So do the math. 5 times 24 is 120. So I'm going to drag this out until I get to around 120. Okay? And now it's going to have that. It's going to use that motion tween capability for this entire 120 frames. So the next thing I want to do is create a keyframe at about frame 45. So about 2 seconds into the animation, I want the ball to be hitting the ground. So I'm going to insert a keyframe, and right here it's going to ask you, do you want the keyframe to have effect on position, scale, skew, rotation, or all, and just select all for simplicity's sake. All right, so then I'll just select the ball and I'm going to move it down towards the bottom of the screen. Basically, as close as I can get it to the bottom without quite touching the bottom of the frame. Okay, and you see that it's now created that path. You can see it, but it doesn't look to me like the ball is falling perfectly vertically, so I'm going to just use the arrow buttons on my keyboard and fix that until it looks a little more vertical to me. Yeah, that seems right there. Okay, so once you've done that, you've actually already created some animation. So check it out. If I rewind back to here and hit play, see the ball will just fall towards the bottom of the screen. So you've done that much. Now, I want the ball to squish a little bit when it gets down to the bottom, so I'm going to grab this red scrubber right here. Here's the scrubber. I'm going to pull this back to frame 45. And that's where the ball is now. And actually, I want it on frame 46, so I'm going to move it one forward. Then I'm going to select the ball, and I'm going to go up to Modify, and I'm going to select Transform and Free Transform. And the bounding box is going to pop up around the ball. So then I'm going to move this down into actual contact with the floor. And I'm actually going to squish the ball just a little bit. Just like that, okay? And you'll see that it squishes from the center, so I actually have to use the arrow key to make sure that it stays in contact with the floor. What I've done is inserted a keyframe. Each keyframe is a point where Animate will know that there's a change to the animation, and it'll pick that up. However you have created the frame in the artboard on that keyframe, it knows that that's the way that your animation needs to appear when it gets to that frame of the animation. All right, so I'm going to move the scrubber over one more to, I guess that's frame 47, and I'm going to squish the ball a little bit more. And move it down to give it contact with the floor. And make another keyframe. So I'm going to keep doing this. Insert keyframe, all, squish. Not too much at a time. And I'm just going to keep going through and doing this. And you're doing this to create that sort of dynamics of if it's a rubber ball and it's hitting the ground, the way that it'll squish. So just doing this little bit right here, you get an idea of how painstaking animation can be without computer assistance. I'm pretty sure that we could use a scaling or skewing tween to do this, but for this first one, we're just going to kind of use keyframes for this part. And so now, if you want to just go back and see the previous, so there's no change between these two. I'm using these two arrows. See, if I go back like this, you can see what the animation's looking like. And so I need to squish it on this scene and move it down a little bit. And you're just going to keep at this. I'm going to do it one more time on the contraction of it. Okay, and so we'll think about that as sort of the final point in this squishing down, and now it's got to squish back up. So I will animate all of that. Start to make it bigger again, and now you have to kind of move it up or the bottom of the ball will start to disappear in frames. And I'm probably going to do this until I get almost to frame about 60. And I need to unsquish until the ball gets back to a perfectly round shape, right? You want to make sure that the ball stays in contact with the floor in this whole squishing process, because it wouldn't start to bounce back up until it had reformed back into its original shape. This is definitely the most time-consuming, or these are definitely the most time-consuming frames of the animation. Almost there now, though. Yeah, and that looks perfectly round. Maybe one more. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so there we are.
Attention students, I need Nasir Thomas, Leanne Rivera, Caroline Crittenden, Emma Hudgens, and Andrea Mackey to the front office. Once again, Nasir Thomas, Leanne Rivera, Caroline Crittenden, Emma Hudgens, and Andrea Mackey. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to insert a keyframe at about here. Once I've finished animating the shape change of the ball. And now I can use that motion tween again. I'm going to go ahead and use the arrow keys on my keyboard to make sure that it goes straight back up. If you drag it, then you might kind of distort the motion like off to the left or right. But you can do that and then just position it again. It goes kind of slow if you use the arrow. So if you drag, just go up here, and when you finish, make sure that the center of the ball lines up over the keyframe where it was in its original position, and that'll make it bounce correctly. Okay, so now I've got these few extra frames here at the end, and if I play my animation, you'll see it pauses when it gets to the top of the screen. The squishing looks good though. And you'll see when it gets back up to this final keyframe, it'll just pause. So I need to add a couple more frames just to make that look right. So I'm gonna go, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames. So I'm gonna go up for 2 frames, pause, and then down for a few frames. Okay, so move 1 over, insert a keyframe, and move it up. And then I'm going to create another keyframe. And move it up again. Move over a keyframe. And move it up one more time. Then I'll move back to here, insert a keyframe, and I got to start moving it down again. And I want it to start exactly where it began. That looks pretty good. And then I'll have it pause there. Okay, so now if I rewind, hit play. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now if I want this to loop, I'll select the loop button and this gray oval will pop up. So I'll drag this out. And when I hit play now, it'll loop. So it'll just continue around and around. So it goes down. So this is about a 5-second animation. And looks like it's looping pretty smoothly. Okay, so then what I'm going to want to do is add some color to the background. So to do that, I'll go ahead and pause it. I'll create a new layer. And I want this layer, just like in Illustrator, to be lower than the ball because I want the ball to show up. Okay. Pull this over to here. I need to move this layer back again. Okay, there we go. And so then I want to lock this layer with the ball so that I can't mess that up. And I'm going to create a rectangle. And I'll make the rectangle blue. Just cover the whole canvas that way. And again, because of the way layers work, it's going to be behind the ball. So that's perfect. And now if I hit play, I've got the blue background. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and test this. So to test it, you go up to Control and go down to Test and click on Test. And there it is. You can make the test screen bigger if you want to. Okay, that looks perfect. And so then we just want to save. So I'll close this, go File, Save, and I'll call this Bouncing Ball. I'm going to put that on my desktop, click Save, and now if I show you my desktop, there's Bouncing Ball. Okay, that's what you'll upload to the assignment. Okay? Pretty easy stuff. You could certainly add a little more complexity if you want to figure out some things about how Animate works that I haven't talked about, and share that with me. So I'm looking forward to seeing your work, and thanks for your time.